Hello, I'm Lucas, and this is the story of how I realized that sometimes family can be your greatest enemy, especially in business. For 10 years, I poured my heart and soul into transforming a small family computer repair shop in the suburbs of Cedar Grove, Brightvale, California, into Novatech Solutions, a $50 million tech company. But sometimes, success stirs up envy, even from those who should be celebrating with you. I still vividly remember the early days when the family business was just a modest computer repair shop tucked into a strip mall in Cedar Grove. My father, Henry, opened the shop when I was a kid, and it was his pride and joy. The space was cramped, filled with outdated components, the hum of cooling fans, and the faint smell of machine oil. While the shop brought joy to Dad, it barely kept our family afloat. To him, every repaired computer was a victory. But I saw something more. A potential to create something extraordinary. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Our family consisted of four: Dad, Mom, my older brother Nathan, and me. Nathan was always Dad's greatest hope. He was the cherished son, always getting top grades and graduating from a prestigious Ivy League business school somewhere in San Francisco. In Dad's eyes, Nathan was the future, the one to carry our family name far. My mother, Lillian, was gentle, always trying to keep the peace. She often watched quietly, sometimes giving me a sympathetic glance, but rarely spoke up when Dad praised Nathan. And me? I was the quiet son who stayed in Brightvale, studying computer science at Brightvale Community College, a local school with no notable reputation. While Nathan conquered big cities, I spent my time helping Dad at the shop, assembling computers, fixing software bugs, and learning how to run a small business. Nathan would visit home, and each time, he'd look at me with pity. "Lucas, you're wasting your potential here," he'd say, his tone tinged with arrogance. "You should aim high." But I disagreed. I saw an opportunity in Dad's shop that no one else recognized, a foundation to build something grand. I grew up in Nathan's shadow. From a young age, I loved computers. While other kids played ball outside, I sat in the corner of the shop, tinkering with code on Dad's old PC. I taught myself programming through books and online forums, gradually learning how to turn ideas into reality. Once I fixed a computer that Dad had given up on, and his astonished look was my greatest reward. But Nathan never cared. To him, I was just a repair guy, not worthy of comparison to his ambitions. While Nathan studied theoretical business models at school, I learned practical programming and spotted market gaps. In my final year of college, I noticed that small businesses in Brightvale, from bakeries to auto shops to cafes, struggled with daily operations. They needed a simple, affordable solution to track orders, employees, and revenue. So I started writing a business process management software. I spent hours in my dorm room, coding, testing, and debugging. The software wasn't revolutionary, but it was user-friendly, efficient, and met their needs. When I pitched the idea to Dad, he was skeptical. "Sounds nice, Lucas, but who'd buy this?" he said, frowning. "We're just a repair shop." I didn't blame him. Dad was used to traditional ways, and software was too new. But I didn't give up. I took the software to a cafe in Cedar Grove, offering it for free. A month later, they called back, saying it saved them time and reduced error. Word spread. Other businesses in Brightvale reached out, and soon, Dad's shop wasn't just fixing computers. It was selling software licenses. That initial success changed Dad's perspective. One day, when a big client signed a software deal, he looked at me and said, "Maybe you're onto something, Lucas." Those words were like gold to me, a rare spark of recognition. But I didn't know how fragile they were, or that this success would soon ignite envy within my own family. That was the start of Novatech Solutions. From a small corner of the computer repair shop in Cedar Grove, Brightvale, I planted the seed for a company that would later change everything. The business process management software I wrote in my final year of college wasn't a grand invention, but it hit the mark for local bakeries, auto shops, and cafes. People who never thought they could manage their businesses with technology. After that first success with a nearby cafe, word spread fast. Clients started reaching out in droves, and I suddenly realized Dad's little shop had become the cradle for something far bigger. But as Novatech began to take off, I started noticing strange looks from Nathan, the brother I'd hoped would be proud of me. Those quiet years had forged my patience, but also prepared me for a bitter lesson. Not everyone wants you to succeed, not even family. Those early days weren't easy. I worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. By day, I was at the shop, helping Dad fix computers and meeting clients. By night, I sat in my dorm room, coding, debugging software, and answering emails from businesses wanting to try the product. Some nights, I slept just 2 hours, my eyes burning from staring at the screen too long, but I didn't stop. I knew every line of code, every new client, was a step toward proving I wasn't wasting my potential, as Nathan had said. Dad slowly changed his view. As software contracts brought in money, he stopped frowning when I mentioned expansion ideas. "Keep going, Lucas," he said, his voice tinged with surprise. "Maybe this shop can be something bigger." Those words were huge encouragement, but I also realized Dad's recognition had limits. In his mind, Nathan was still his greatest pride, the one expected to make our family a notable name. While I buried myself in work, Nathan was building a career at a prestigious consulting firm in San Francisco. He rarely visited Brightvale, and when he did, he only asked about the shop in passing. "Still fixing computers, Lucas," he'd say, with a half smile. "Why not try something more exciting?" I didn't respond. I knew he didn't understand what I was doing, and I didn't need him to. At least not then. But deep down, I wanted to prove I wasn't lesser. Not just to Nathan, but to Dad too. Gradually, Dad's computer repair shop transformed into a real software company. I rented a small office at Brightvale Innovation Hub, an emerging tech center in the city. Novatech Solutions was no longer just serving local businesses. We started signing contracts with companies across California, then nationwide. My software kept improving, adding features like automated reporting and payment platform integrations. Clients loved its simplicity, and I took pride in hearing them say Novatech made their work easier. But success came at a cost. I turned down multiple job offers in Silicon Valley, where big companies were ready to pay high salaries to lure me. "Lucas, you can't stay in this town forever," my mom once said, her voice worried. She often brought food to the office on late nights, trying to convince me to rest. "You need a life outside work." But I couldn't stop. I was driven by a vision to make Novatech a big name, and perhaps, deep down, by a desire to prove I deserved my family's recognition. Mom was the only one who seemed to understand my sacrifices. "Don't overwork yourself, Lucas," she'd say, placing a lunchbox in front of me. "You need to stay healthy." I'd smile, thank her. But inside, I knew I couldn't slow down. Every new contract, every satisfied client was a brick in my dream. But sometimes, alone in the office, I wondered if Dad and Nathan would ever truly see what I was doing. Then came a major milestone. 5 years after the software launched, Novatech hit $1 million in annual revenue. It was a moment I'll never forget. I stood in our new office, looking out at Brightvale's streets, feeling like all my efforts had finally paid off. Dad patted my shoulder, a rare smile on his face. "Not bad, Lucas," he said. But even in that moment, I heard him mention Nathan. "If Nathan were here, he could help this company grow faster," he said, as if what I'd done still wasn't enough. That's when Nathan suddenly took an interest in Novatech. He called from San Francisco, his voice excited. "Heard Dad's company is doing well, Lucas. Maybe it's time I got involved." I froze, unsure how to respond. Nathan, who never cared about the shop, now wanted to get involved. I tried to push aside the unease, convincing myself he just wanted to help. But deep down, I knew things were about to change. At a dinner at Ocean View Bistro, the mood was supposed to be celebratory, but quickly turned into a bitter turning point. Nathan stood up, raising his wine glass, his voice brimming with confidence. "I think it's time I took on a more fitting role at Novatech. With my business experience, the company can go further." Dad immediately nodded, his eyes gleaming with pride. "Excellent, Nathan. We need someone with vision like you to take Novatech to new heights." I sat there, my grip tightening slightly on my chopsticks, trying to keep a calm face while my heart felt like it had been hollowed out. Novatech, the name I chose, the dream I built from initial lines of code, from sleepless nights, was now being handed to my brother like a belated birthday gift. I glanced at Mom. She said nothing, just quietly stared at her steamed fish, her hands trembling slightly as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. And me, the son who always stayed silent in the family, chose silence once again. I wanted to remind Dad that I was the one who turned that small shop into a $1 million company. But I didn't. Maybe I was too used to believing that if I worked hard enough, I'd be recognized. I was wrong, and I realized that wasn't just a dinner. It was the start of a storm I wasn't mentally prepared to face. Just days after the dinner, Dad called a meeting at Novatech's office in Brightvale Innovation Hub. In front of me and a few key employees, he announced that Nathan would become co-CEO alongside me. Nathan has an Ivy League degree, and experience in San Francisco, Dad said, as if that was enough to make up for his lack of knowledge about the technology or software I'd developed. His professionalism will elevate the company's image. I sat there, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath me. Nathan, who never cared about the shop, was now given equal control. Nathan didn't waste time asserting himself. He moved from San Francisco to Brightvale, rented a luxury apartment downtown, and started showing up at the office in expensive suits. While I continued working with engineers, improving the business process management software, Nathan focused on building his personal brand. He contacted tech magazines, appeared in Tech Trend with an interview about leadership vision in the tech industry. He won a Young Entrepreneur of the Year award at a California event, standing on stage, talking about Novatech's innovation, as if he'd written every line of code. Those words cut like a knife. The software he praised was my work, my sleepless nights, my bug fixes until my eyes burned. But to the world, Nathan was Novatech's face. I tried to remind myself that what mattered was the company's growth, not who got credit. I buried myself in work, meeting clients, ensuring our software met their needs. But every time I saw Nathan in the press, I felt a part of me being stolen. Tensions between Nathan and me grew. He started holding investor meetings without inviting me. Once I overheard him tell a partner, "Lucas is only good for technical stuff, not modern business." I stood outside the meeting room, my fists clenched, trying to suppress my anger. I wanted to barge in, to say that I was the one who took Novatech from nothing to millions in revenue, but I didn't. I didn't want Dad to think I was causing trouble. I thought that by continuing to do my job well, the truth would speak for itself. But Nathan didn't stop. He started making major decisions without consulting me. He proposed changing the software's interface, saying it was too simple and needed to be more modern to attract investors. When I objected, explaining that simplicity was why clients loved it, he smirked. "Lucas, you need to think bigger," he said, his tone patronizing. "The market today needs image, not just function." I wanted to shout that it was that function that made Novatech successful, but I just nodded and walked away. Dad seemed oblivious to the tension between us. He frequently called Nathan, asking for business strategy advice, while my contributions were downplayed. "Nathan has San Francisco experience," he'd say, as if that automatically made him better. Mom was the only one who noticed the pressure I was under. "You don't have to do everything alone, Lucas," she said during one of her food deliveries to the office. Talk to Dad. But I shook my head. I didn't want to burden her, and I didn't want Dad to think I couldn't handle this. Despite the growing tension, Novatech thrived. Our revenue grew steadily, and the software kept attracting new clients. But I felt like I was being pushed to the sidelines, as if the company I'd built no longer belonged to me. Nathan, with his confident smile and polished words, was stealing the spotlight. While I was stuck in the shadows, I tried to convince myself I could work with him, that we were brothers and would find a way to collaborate. But deep down, I knew things were going wrong. Success doesn't come without complications. It brings envy, scheming, and sometimes betrayal from those who share your blood. Nathan had returned, not as a brother, but as a quiet force, trying to seize what I'd built in silence over 10 years. The tension between us finally exploded at Dad's 60th birthday party. Nathan organized an extravagant event at the Grand Horizon Hotel, turning the celebration into a flamboyant showcase of himself. With hundreds of guests, dazzling lights, and meticulously prepared speeches, he wasn't celebrating Dad. He was celebrating himself. And that night, in front of family and partners, he publicly humiliated me. For him, it wasn't just a birthday party, but a chance to flaunt his successful entrepreneur image. He rented out the grand ballroom, inviting hundreds of guests, from business partners and Novatech clients to family friends. I knew from the start this wasn't for Dad. It was Nathan's stage. I arrived early to help set up, wearing a simple blue dress shirt and slacks, attire I thought was respectable enough. But as soon as I stepped into the ballroom, Nathan looked me up and down, frowning. "Lucas, couldn't you try a little harder?" he whispered, his tone dripping with disdain. "Important people are coming tonight." I gritted my teeth, ignoring the jab. I wasn't here to show off. I just wanted to make sure everything went smoothly for Dad. I moved around the room, checking the tables, greeting hotel staff, and arranging the gift I'd prepared for Dad. A photo album chronicling Novatech's journey from the small repair shop in Cedar Grove to a multi-million-dollar company. As guests arrived, the room quickly filled. Business partners, major clients, and family friends chatted lively, wine glasses gleaming under chandeliers. Nathan moved like a politician, shaking hands, flashing smiles, and introducing himself as CEO of Novatech. I stayed in the background, ensuring everything ran smoothly, from the sound system to the menu. Mom watched me from a distance, her eyes filled with worry, but she said nothing. Dad was busy greeting guests, beaming when standing next to Nathan. Dinner began, and I sat at the main table with the family, feeling like an outsider. Then Nathan stood, tapping his wine glass to draw attention. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. Thought he'd say something about Dad, a tribute, a story about the shop's early days, or at least a family memory. But what he said next stopped my heart. As we celebrate my father's 60th birthday, Nathan began, his voice echoing in the hushed room. I think it's time to announce some changes at Novatech Solutions. I looked up, a chill running down my spine. Changes? What was he talking about? The board has agreed that the company needs a single leader to move forward. Nathan continued, his eyes flicking toward me, cold and sharp. For too long, we've been held back by outdated thinking and resistance to change. So, starting today, I will assume the role of sole CEO. The room buzzed with whispers. I sat there with my hands trembling, trying to process what was happening. The board? What meetings was I not invited to? Nathan went on, his voice dripping with pretense. Some people, he said, staring straight at me, are better suited for technical roles, not leadership. My brother has done well, maintaining our old systems, but to compete in today's market, we need vision. We need excellence. And frankly, Lucas, you're not cut out for this level of business. Blood rushed to my head. The room seemed to spin. Nathan didn't stop. The truth is, he said, his voice rising, you're useless in the modern business world, Lucas. Your outdated ideas and lack of formal business education have become a burden. It's time you stepped aside gracefully. Silence engulfed the room. Hundreds of eyes turned to me, pitying, curious, judging. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd speak up, defend me. But he just nodded along with Nathan, a proud smile on his face. Mom looked down, her hands trembling over her plate. I felt like everything I'd built, every sleepless night, every line of code, every contract, was being torn apart in front of everyone. I stood up, slowly and deliberately. The sound of my chair scraping the wooden floor echoed sharply in the deathly quiet room, like a final note in an unfinished song. All eyes were on me, perhaps expecting a fiery outburst, a rage, or at least a few tears. But I didn't give them that. I walked to the main table, placing the photo album, the gift I'd quietly prepared, in front of Dad. Its worn leather cover held precious moments from the first repair shop to Novatech's first contracts. Happy birthday, Dad, I said, my voice steady and calm. No accusations, no glance at Nathan. Just me and the last shred of dignity I held tightly in my hands. Then I turned, striding out of the brightly lit room, filled with laughter and chatter. My head was held high, not out of pride, but because I knew if I looked down now, I'd never lift it again. Outside, Brightvale's streetlights twinkled in the night like forgotten stars, but I didn't forget. I couldn't. Nathan's words, "You're not cut out for this world," echoed in my head like a cold, sharp blade. But amidst the pain, something in me awoke. It wasn't the hurt of an overlooked son anymore, but the clarity of a founder ready to reclaim what was his. Nathan thought he'd won, thought his polished words and superficial support could steal Novatech from me. He was wrong. That night, I didn't just leave a party. I stepped into a war, and I knew exactly where to start. I drove to my small apartment in the suburbs of Cedar Grove, my mind swirling with memories of the past 10 years, the sleepless nights, the code I wrote, the contracts I signed. Every step of Novatech bore my mark, not Nathan. As I entered my home office, I turned on my laptop, its screen casting light on the diplomas and awards hanging on the wall, all bearing my name. I looked at them, and a faint smile crossed my lips. Nathan had overlooked a critical detail, one that would turn his victory into the biggest mistake of his life. I started drafting emails, my fingers flying across the keyboard. First, I wrote to Novatech's major clients, those who signed contracts because they trusted me, my business process management software. I briefly explained the leadership change Nathan announced at the party and informed them I'd be leaving the company, but I didn't stop there. In the emails, I reminded them of a key contract clause. If I, the software's creator, no longer worked at Novatech, they could terminate their contracts immediately. I knew most clients were loyal to me, not Nathan. They signed because of my dedication, my cross-country trips to fix software bugs, my listening to their feedback. Next, I emailed key employees, the engineers and programmers I'd hired and trained at the Brightvale Innovation Hub office. I didn't ask them to leave Novatech, but I shared that I was planning a new project, and they could join if they wanted. I knew many respected me, not just as a boss, but because I'd worked alongside them, line by line, bug by bug. I wasn't sure how they'd respond, but I trusted the loyalty we'd built. Then came the most critical part. I opened legal documents on my computer, reviewing details I'd carefully prepared over the years. When Novatech was founded 10 years ago, Dad split the shares, 50% for him, 25% for me, 25% for Nathan. But 3 years ago, when the company needed capital to expand, Dad sold an additional 26% of his shares to me in exchange for my investment. He was too busy with Nathan's events to read the paperwork closely, and I became the majority shareholder with 51%. That meant I, not Nathan or Dad, controlled Novatech. But that wasn't all. The business process management software, the heart of Novatech, generating 80% of revenue, didn't actually belong to the company. It was owned by Innovex Solutions LLC, a separate company I'd set up in the early days. Novatech only had a licensing agreement to use the software, and that agreement, I confirmed, had expired this very week. Dad had signed renewal papers, but I'd deliberately not filed them, a decision that now became my ace in the hole. I leaned back, taking a deep breath, feeling like I was preparing for a chess game I'd played in my head hundreds of times. I sent all the emails in the early morning hours, while Brightvale slept. Each click was a step toward reclaiming what was mine. But inside, I didn't just feel resolved. There was a pang of pain, a hint of guilt at the thought of confronting my own family. Dad, despite favoring Nathan, was still someone I loved. Mom, with her worried glances, didn't deserve the hurt this would cause. But Nathan had crossed a line. He'd called me useless in front of hundreds, and I couldn't let that slide. As the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I opened my inbox. Responses flooded in. A major client from California wrote, "Lucas, we signed because of you. If you leave, we're out too." A veteran engineer messaged, "I'm with you, Lucas. Novatech is nothing without you." Those words were like fire in my chest. Painful, warm, urging. I stood, looking out the window where Brightvale was waking under a thin layer of fog. I knew today would be a turning point. Nathan and Dad thought they'd pushed me out of Novatech. They had no idea I'd been preparing for this day for a long time. I put on a dark dress shirt, buttoning it like I was donning armor. In my mind, I pictured the confrontation ahead. Nathan, smug and delusional, walking in like a victim. Dad, by his side, his hopeful gaze fixed on his successful son. But they didn't know I held the aces, controlling shares, software ownership, the soul of Novatech, and above all, the trust of those who'd stood by me from the start. The sunrise bathed the office, pale golden light casting shadows on the wooden floor. I sat at my familiar desk, cradling a steaming coffee mug, my eyes glued to the laptop screen, where response emails kept pouring in. Each message was a piece of the new strength I was gathering, as if Novatech's entire ecosystem was quietly shifting to follow me. I arrived at the company early. The office was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning hum. In the meeting room, I opened my tablet, scrolling through the legal documents I'd reviewed all night. The 51% of Novatech shares were mine, something Nathan didn't know. The software licensing agreement had expired, and I, as the legal representative of Innovex Solutions LLC, had full rights to revoke it. When the clock struck 9 a.m., the front door clicked open. Nathan walked in, followed by Dad. Both held their heads high, smiling as if victory was already there. But they didn't know the game had started long before they realized. And this time, I was the one setting the rules. "Lucas." Nathan paused, his voice a mix of surprise and irritation. "What are you doing here? I thought after last night, you'd have the decency to stay home." I smiled, staying calm, recalling the emails I'd sent. "Just tying up some loose ends, big brother," I replied, my voice light but sharp. "But since you're here, we should talk about Novatech's future." "There's nothing to discuss," Dad cut in, his tone firm. "Nathan's in charge now. The board has agreed." I looked at him, a pang in my chest, but I didn't let it overwhelm me. "Yes, about the board," I said, opening my tablet and projecting a document onto the meeting room screen. "Let's clear up a few things you both seem to have forgotten." I started with the shares. When Novatech was founded, Dad held 50%. Nathan and I each had 25%. But 3 years ago, when the company needed capital to expand, Dad sold an additional 26% of his shares to me. "Remember that day, Dad?" I looked him in the eye, You were busy at Nathan's award ceremony, so you signed the papers without reading closely. Dad's face paled, his hands gripping the chair. Nathan clenched the table, his voice trembling. No way, he whispered. Dad would never, but he did, I continued, projecting the share document. I own 51% of Novatech. That means I, not Nathan or Dad, control the company. The room fell silent. Through the glass, I saw employees gathering, whispering as they checked emails on their phones. They'd likely seen my messages. And that's not all, I said, moving to the next document. The business process management software, which generates 80% of Novatech's revenue, doesn't belong to the company. It belongs to Innovex Solutions LLC, my private company. Novatech only has a licensing agreement, and that expired. I glanced at my watch. About 10 minutes ago, if my timing's right. Dad slumped in his chair, his face like he'd been struck. The renewal papers, he muttered. Those documents you gave me last week, when I was busy with the birthday party. Exactly, I said. I chose not to file them. Nathan shot up, his face red. You snake, he yelled. You dare play dirty with your own family. I raised a hand, cutting him off. Careful with your words, Nathan. Want to hear the rest? I projected emails on the screen, responses from major clients. Last night, while you were celebrating your win, I contacted our key clients. Most of their contracts have a personal loyalty clause. They signed with Novatech because of me, my expertise, my reputation. Want to know how many have already activated their termination clauses, or how many engineers have agreed to join my new project? Silence engulfed the room. Nathan sank back, his hands shaking as he checked his phone. Dad looked at me, his eyes a mix of anger and despair. Through the glass, I saw more employees gathering, the whispers spreading. You can't do this, Nathan stammered. The company you're trying to steal from me. I shook my head. The company you tried to steal from me. The company you thought you could take, just because you have an Ivy League degree and Dad's support. That company ceased to exist the moment you called me useless in front of everyone. I stood, gently straightening my shirt collar, as if aligning the posture of a decision maker. My voice wasn't loud, but it was chillingly clear. You have two options. One, I walk away with my 51% shares, the software ownership, the client base, and the core engineering team. Novatech will be an empty shell, and you'll have to explain to those important peoples from last night why the company collapsed overnight. Dad sat frozen, his eyes clouded. He spoke slowly, his voice like that of a man aged a decade. And the second option. I looked at him, not hiding my wariness. You and Nathan step back. Keep your shares, but as passive investors, collect profits, no operational involvement. Nathan gets financial support and a letter of recommendation to start over somewhere else, far from Brightvale. Nathan shot up, his eyes blazing. You planned this all along, didn't you? Waiting for the perfect moment to stab your family in the back. I smiled, a faint smile with no mercy left. No, Nathan, you're wrong. For 10 years, I just wanted to be a good son, a good brother, trying to prove I was worthy. But every effort was dismissed. I only started this plan after you called me useless in front of hundreds. My phone buzzed, a brief message from a major partner. We're out if Lucas isn't at Novatech. I turned off the screen, setting the phone down. Time's running out. Choose. After that fateful morning at the Brightvale Innovation Hub office, Novatech entered a new chapter. Nathan and Dad signed their resignations, officially becoming powerless shareholders. Nathan left the company with financial support and a letter of recommendation, enough for him to start over in another city, far from where it all began. That afternoon, I sat quietly by the 16th floor window, looking down at Brightvale's streets glowing with golden lights. I'd reclaimed what was mine: leadership, respect, and Novatech's soul. But in my heart, instead of triumphant joy, there was a void. I was no longer the son of a close-knit family, just a man who survived a battle, with wounds not easily healed. Novatech was back, but my family wasn't. I set to work rebuilding Novatech, not just to restore it, but to take it to new heights. I focused on transparency and respect for the employees who chose to stay through the storm. The engineers, who'd worked with me through long nights fixing bugs, became the company's core. I upgraded the business process management software, adding features like real-time data analytics to help clients optimize faster. Clients who'd threatened to terminate their contracts returned, not just for the software, but because they believed in me. Within a year, Novatech's valuation tripled, from $50 million to $150 million, proof that I wasn't useless, as Nathan had claimed. But that success didn't fill the void in my heart. My family ties were now like an unhealed wound. Nathan moved to Seattle, working for a small startup. I heard he's humbler now, but we don't talk, just exchanging polite texts on holidays. Dad retired, spending most of his time at home, occasionally calling about Novatech, but never mentioning the past. I know he realizes his mistake in favoring Nathan, but an apology remains a gap between us. Mom was the only one trying to mend things. One evening, she came to the office, bringing a lunchbox like the days I worked late. "Did it have to end like this, Lucas?" she asked, her eyes red. I held her hand, my voice gentle but firm. "They left me no choice, Mom. They wanted to take everything I built and cast me aside." She nodded, her eyes sad but understanding. "You did the right thing, but I just wish our family hadn't fallen apart." Her words haunted me, but I knew I couldn't go back. I kept moving forward, not just for myself, but for those who believed in me. Novatech became a symbol of innovation in Brightvale, drawing attention across California. One day, I got an email from the Brightvale Tech Summit organizers, the region's biggest tech event. They invited me to speak on the power of the underestimated. I smiled reading the invite, thinking of Nathan and Dad who once called me outdated. I accepted, knowing this was a chance to share my story, not to boast, but to inspire others. Sitting alone in the Brightvale Innovation Hub office, preparing for my Tech Summit speech, I let my gaze drift to the brightly lit streets below. Novatech was truly mine now, not just legally, but in every decision, every line of code my team and I wrote. But this victory wasn't just about reclaiming control. It was a statement for everyone underestimated, sidelined, that persistence and belief can reshape a destiny. Nathan and Dad were forced to see that, though too late to salvage what once existed between us. And I learned that sometimes, to protect what you've built with blood, sweat, and faith, you have to face those who stand against you, even if they're family. I opened my desk drawer, pulling out the worn photo album, the birthday gift I'd prepared for Dad, but never handed over. It held Novatech Solutions' long journey, from a small repair shop in Cedar Grove to a tech enterprise worth hundreds of millions. Each photo was a slice of memory, reminding me that this legacy didn't come from luck, but from years of quiet persistence amid doubt. I knew tomorrow's speech wouldn't just be about welcoming new tech or sharing leadership tips. It would be a true story about someone once called useless, who stepped back to let others shine but ultimately stepped forward to claim his worth. Nathan, with his confident demeanor and prestigious degrees, thought he could seize others' achievements with fame. Dad, believing he was doing right, let blind expectations make him forget who carried Novatech through every storm. They learned the truth, but at the cost of fractures not easily mended. We still meet on holidays, exchanging polite small talk like strangers once close. No more long conversations, no laughter over dinner. The old wounds remain, not bleeding but not healed, like memories of a battle where no one truly won. Mom once said something I'll never forget. "Success is the best revenge, but maturity is knowing when to stop." She was right. I once wanted Nathan and Dad to pay for their insults, but now, I don't need revenge. Novatech's success, from the business process management software to tripling in value in a year, speaks for itself. I've moved past the pain, focusing on building a meaningful legacy, not just for myself, but for those who trust me. Last week, I got an invite to speak at the Brightvale Tech Summit on the power of the underestimated. I accepted immediately, smiling at the story I'd tell. Not one of revenge, but of persistence, of standing up when the world turns away. As I prepared my speech, I glanced at the photo album on my desk. Maybe one day, when the wounds have healed, I'll give it to Dad. But for now, it's a reminder that my greatest strength came from what Nathan and Dad once dismissed. As I write this, I stand at my office window, looking down at bustling Brightvale. Novatech keeps growing, but more importantly, I've found peace within myself. Success isn't just numbers or fame. It's living true to your values, even at a cost. I've done that, and when I step onto the Brightvale Tech Summit stage, I'll carry this story, a tale of someone underestimated, who proved he could build an empire from nothing. Lucas's story, and his journey building Novatech Solutions in Brightvale, California, reflect many facets of life in America today, where competitive pressures, family expectations, and being underestimated can shape personal journeys. Lucas, a quiet programmer, turned a Cedar Grove repair shop into a $150 million company, despite his brother Nathan's disdain and his father's favoritism. Nathan's public humiliation, calling Lucas useless at the birthday party, mirrors the harsh reality in America, where personal success is often overshadowed by superficial image or prestigious degrees, like Nathan's Ivy League credentials. Lucas faced a culture that glorifies flashiness, like Nathan's tech trend feature, but proved that true value lies in persistence and expertise, as he retained client and employee loyalty through his business process management software. The lesson from this story for Americans today is don't let others' underestimation define your worth. Focus on your work and build your own legacy. In a society obsessed with social media and fame, like Nathan's display at the Grand Horizon Hotel, it's easy to get caught up comparing yourself to others. But Lucas, though called outdated, used his 51% stake and Innovex Solutions LLC ownership to reclaim Novatech, showing the importance of thorough preparation and self-belief. His mother's words, that success is the best revenge, but maturity is knowing when to stop, remind us that in fiercely competitive America, maturity means rising above bitterness to focus on bigger goals. Learn from Lucas, work hard, hold your values, and let your success speak, as he prepared to do at the Brightvale Tech Summit. Subscribe to the channel to follow the journeys of people like Lucas Tran, overcoming challenges to prove their worth. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video at the Brightvale Tech Summit.